course, I won't belabor and make a whole long speech about us starting late. Let's get right into it. I just want to begin, as always, really with thanking the Lehman family for making all this possible. Very much, and also Shomer Amuna for agreeing to host us. And thanking our tech crew, as always. And now we get right into the matters. We have a lot of ground, as always, to cover. Tonight is the second lecture of the 7 Jewish historians, as I was going to talk about. And the second one is Azari de Rossi. And let's plunge right into it. Some of you, many of you are here where we talked about Josephus last time. Josephus was unusual. Remember, he's the only guy from that time that was interested in history, wrote a history book. There are no other Jews that did that, the genre of history. The rabbis at the time of Josephus weren't writing anything. It's still in the golden age of the Torah Shabbal Peh, in which they were opposed in principle to writing books, but Josephus wasn't. Now, in the next 1,000 years, that's a long time, I'll change my mind. In the next 1,500 years, that's a very long time, there was no interest in history during the Middle Ages in the modern sense of the term history. There was nobody who updated Josephus' Antiquities. Remember, he took it from the creation of the world down to his time. Nobody picked the ball up and took it forward from where he did it. What you had, because there's always some interest in the past, in the Middle Ages were some chronicles, which is not the same thing as a history book, mainly about 2 subjects. First of all, people want to know about the Shalshalas HaKabbalah, which means how did the rabbinic tradition unfold? Moshe Kibbel Torah Sinai, Masar Yeshua, Yeshua Zakanim. How does all that work out? Give me some clarity. That has to do mainly, even that is something that's not really rabbinically, genuine. Had to do with the Karaites, who in the early part of the Middle Ages challenged the entire rabbinic tradition in principle, and they said the whole Gemara is made up as a bunch of baloney, and the rabbi just made up as they went along. And in order to counter that, they said, oh no, Moshe had it, and then he passed it down to this generation, and this went 40 generations down to the Talmud, and from the Talmud on to what you call the Gaoni. Oh, no. So Rav Shira Gaon, for example, most famously, living in the 10th century, composes this whole kind of a document in which he tries to say the chain of command going down the ages. Many of you possibly are more familiar with the Rambam's famous unfolding of that in his intro to the Mishnah Torah. Another very famous book along these lines, the Ravid, not the Ravid, but the Ravid, Avram ben David in Spain in the 1000s, I think, or 1100s was it? And again, he's basically interested, which set of rabbis come after the other set of rabbis. So this is beyond elitism. They just want to know who is the bearers of our tradition, right? So I hear this is a culture in which you study the Gemara and the commentaries and want to know just, is Rashi first or is this guy first or that? That's not really about history. And he told a couple of stories. In addition to that, you have chronicles in the Middle Ages of martyrdom, of Gezeros and Kiddush Hashem, the Crusades. Here, take a look. There's a book published in Yiddish, in Vilna, I think. The Naya Shevet Yehud HaSholem. The Shevet Yehud is a classic book about the sufferings of the Jews in 1492. Oh, this one offers you more than that. It gives you all the suffering, so you can have a good time in the 9 days reading this book. What do you have? I can't read it all. It's the Shevet Yehud HaSholem. You have the Zweite Kreuzfahrt, the Second Crusade. Oh boy, that's fun. Then you have the Xeris, and they also add Xeris Tach V'Tat about Chmielnitsky's massacres. It doesn't get better than this. You have what to talk about. This is what they call history. Now, it's not history, it's accounts, it's chronicles. It's tales of specific, stories over there, mainly for the purpose of edification. Similar situation, by the way, is in the non-Jewish world. In the Christian world, European historians, there weren't any. What you had was this sort of thing. You have monks copying manuscripts in the Middle Ages, and maybe they chronicle too or here or there, but not any kind of business of trying to understand, as we would understand today, modern historical causality, what are the causes and unfolding and all that kind of business. Remember, in the Middle Ages, which is what I'm talking about, which lasted a long time, there's the overwhelming influence of totalizing medieval culture, which means everything is religious. If you're a Christian, especially in Christian Europe and all these countries in Western and Central Europe, the music is Christian music to be used on Christian occasions. Chazanas, funerals, plays, play itself, mischak, as they call it, clothing, architecture. Everything is for the greater glory of God, meaning everything's subsumed under a religious rubric. And that's one of the reasons why the Ashkenazi Jews, as I've said many times, were culturally insular, because there wasn't any books out there except of a Christian nature. Now, in a case of listen closely, in a case of an overwhelmingly religious kind of mindset, there's no humanism. And by that I mean there's no interest in man as such. The influence is on God. You follow? The man as he relates or she relates to God. And you want to know if somebody's good or bad or something like that, how do they relate? And each religious tradition looks through its own lenses to God. If you want to know about the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, how does God do it? You see, he's at the center of the study. And then comes the Renaissance, as we know, at least in Western Europe, which is basically a phenomenon of the Italian peninsula primarily. Here's Italy, which is, I'm sure you know, after this crowd has been with me before, Italy didn't exist as a single country until 1870. And so in the old days, a bunch of different countries. So 2/3 of the country, 2/3 was just the kingdom of Naples and the papal state. This is the territory owned by the Pope, ruled by the Pope as a king. Remember, again, I'm sure many of you do, that the Pope wears 2 hats in the old days. One hat is the head of the church, which he still wears, and then separate from that, he owns a country. Okay, it's not bad work if you could get it. You know, he owns a country, and that country was called the Papal States, the States of the Pope, which you see is the territories throughout the middle of Italy. There were a lot of wars. I'll show you in a minute. Movie about that, and battles, which territories the Pope should get against this duke or that republic or stuff like that. And then in the north, and that's where we're going to be talking about today, north of these 2 countries, this is 2/3 of the country, right? Here's one country, and here's another. And then to the north, there's a whole bunch of different little colors, a whole bunch of different little states, which makes the Renaissance so interesting or confusing if you're trying to follow a movie or read a book. Where's the Duchy of Ferrara in relation to the Duchy of Mantua, and how does Venice get involved in a war against Florence? And after a while you just give up and you say the Italians, how it goes. And what do we mean when we say the Renaissance, which means the rebirth? So the Renaissance is a loaded term, but what it means is a little bit of secularity, a little bit of humanism, not a lot. So when we think of people like this, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, who are, of course, classical figures that everybody's heard of, being big shots and very important figures in the Italian Renaissance, what they mean is that they're interesting because they move a little bit from religion. What I'm trying to say is the following, and get this straight, because this is going to inform everything I'm going to be talking about tonight. Middle Ages, all religious. Nowadays, all atheist. Renaissance, half and half. Okay, get it? Now culture, all atheist, all material, whatever word you like. In those days, all religious. You follow? And in the middle, like especially the Renaissance, 50-50. Actually, more like 90-10. To be honest, still 90% religious, 10% not. We could debate that, but you get the general idea. Now, that's interesting. It means that for the first time in Christian Europe, they were going to allow a little bit of secular. It should still be overwhelmingly Catholic, and so classics are okay. Classics mean the Romans and the Greeks. Nobody is going to convert back to worshiping Jupiter or Minerva or something. So you can have a Renaissance painting of a parade of Julius Caesar, such as you see over here, even though it doesn't involve Jesus, it doesn't involve a Bible picture. It's okay if it's about the Romans, famous sorts of things. The classics are okay. Humanism is okay. What kind of picture is this in a religious culture? It's just a picture of a girl, Mona Lisa, right? Who cares about a girl? Who cares about a guy? You understand what I'm saying? In the Middle Ages, there's no picture of a person. It's a Jesus. It's a saint. Maybe a king. Some big shot like that. All right. A regular person, you say like this, no, I'm interested in a person because of the person. Person, Adam laheveldama. What's a person? A person's a piece of junk. You're here today, gone tomorrow. You're nothing. Right? God is everything. You're nothing. Why do we care? And here, Leonardo said like this, I'm interested in Lisa. Get it? It's just interesting to me. So that's humanism. You follow? Now, all this is happening in Italy. The Renaissance also saw beginnings, among other things, of historical criticism, a little bit. Okay? So you have people like Lorenzo Valla. These are a bunch of names of people who start looking at the past and just asking a few questions, not too many questions, but, is this part true? Or how do, if you have a history of this and this period, how do you know it's accurate? Maybe there's a little exaggeration, maybe not. Can we compare what it says one place over the other? Not much. History as a humanist discipline emerges, studying human causality with an emphasis on human psychology and personality. Here's the famous Guicciardini, he's famous now, that is the most famous, he's actually a famous person. I learned about him in TA in the 11th grade, just for your information. So Francesco Guicciardini, he writes a history of Italy of 40 years when he was a macher in the events, time of the Borgias and all that junk, and it's very interesting. He knew the players. And so he says, France got into a war with Florence because of this and this reason, and this Italian ruler messed up because I knew him, and he had trouble making decisions. That's how he was. You follow? And the other country got hit with an economic problem, and they didn't respond to it well. No, God plays no role in this. Now, Francesco Guicciardini was an official of the Pope. He is a firm Christian. But when he's writing the account of the times in which he participated, it's a very classic book called History of Italy, which is really a history of 30, 40 years. It's very famous. And when he does, he writes like, so to speak, a modern person. This is brand new. To look at history the way you and I generally understand the term today, it more or less starts with him. Now, how did all this affect the Jews of Italy? What exactly is the situation of Jews in the Italian peninsula in the 16th century? Right off the bat, you understand, and I'll say in a few moments, forget about this, the Kingdom of Naples, because that's conquered early in the 1500s by Spain. And it doesn't take too long for Spain to apply the Spanish rules, which is Jews out. Just like they expelled the Jews in 1492 from the Spanish Peninsula, a little bit later in the 1500s, they expel all the Jews, period, from the Kingdom of Naples. So there's no Jews legally allowed to live as Jews in the southern part of Italy for hundreds of years. I'll repeat again, for hundreds until the 1800s. Okay? So just right off the bat, forget that. What about the middle, the papal states? That's tricky. It depends on the Pope. We did that earlier, a year or two ago, when we talked about the burning of the books, right? Your earlier popes in the 1500s were better to the Jews. Generally speaking, the less from they were, the better they were to the Jews, okay? The best pope for the Jews, Borgia, okay? Right? Because he's not too worried about the Christian parts. And he wants a Jewish doctor. Because, as Heinrich Gretz puts it all the rest of the way, he can't trust a Christian doctor. They slip him a poison. I know the Borgias never heard about poison, but he said the Jewish doctor's not going to do it. Now, it's very interesting. So if there's a history of the Jews in Italy, and if there's an interesting and significant history of Jews of Italy, it's going to be here in the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. From here all the way up, especially all this messy area, you see a bunch of little countries, right? Little duchies and so forth, which are very interesting to visit and very architecturally fancy, and they are really interesting. The Jews were expelled from Sicily in 1492, from Naples in 1541, from almost all of the papal states in 1569. Look at this. Here, in this color is blue, from here to here is the papal states, and all the Jews are kicked out by, I think, Pius IV or Paul V, in the late 1560s, and even before that, they started turning the screws on them. The only exception was Jews were permitted to live here in Rome and here in Ancona. As you can sort of see, this is the port city that has the trade and commerce with the Middle East, and so the Pope needs that revenue. You get it? But everywhere else, he doesn't like it. And even in here, those who were possibly were with me, we talked a little while ago about that lady, Gracia Mendez. Her whole boycott that she wanted was to save the Marranos from Ancona. You understand? Which she was not able to do, but the non-Marranos who were living there, the Italian Jews who never converted to Christianity, and the other Sephardic Jews from here who settled there, were not touched by the Pope. They were just subjected to all kinds of gezeros and discrimination. There's this Ancona, just for the heck of it, is an important Jewish community, has famous rabbis down to the early 1800s. So what can I do? It depends where and when, if we're talking about Italy. The only exception, Venice, by the way, was real tough during this time. Every 10 years, here's Venice. This whole the Republic of Venice is not just a city. Venice itself had conquered a big territory, which is part of the wisdom of the sneaky part of the Venetian state. They kind of defined the Renaissance intriguers, and they're very successful at it. And Venice was very tough on the Jews. Every 10 years, the contract had to be renegotiated. And every time, without exception, they drove hardball bargains, and they took it up to to a minute to 12. Get it? No, it's basically the way they bargain with the Jews crazy. It's a minute to 12, you guys get out of here. And only at 30 seconds to 12, do they say, all right, well, let's just stay under these and these extra conditions and this and extra money. That's who they were. So the only exceptions where the Jews have it fairly good in the 1500s, where our story takes place, are 3 cities near each other, each of which was part of a different country. And it's, let's go back. It's Mantua, which you see is a tiny Medina. Look how small that is. The Duchy of Mantua, the Duchy of Modena, which is here to here, and the Duchy of Ferrara. So on my trip, I see some people, we went to Ferrara. We didn't go to Mantua or Modena. These are all, once upon a time, these little towns which are architectural jewels. They're very interesting to visit. They're very pretty, all the rest of it. Got a lot of Jewish history. And one time or another, in the 1600s, 1700s, they were important Jewish, you'd be surprised, they're important Jewish centers. You walk in the Jewish neighborhood, it's not very big at all, and it was a big yeshiva there once, it was a famous scholarship, it was this, that was the other. It's quite interesting. Now, I say there were exceptions, there were relative exceptions. Here, the Duke of here are the 3 dukes. The Este family, which ruled Ferrara, they were good to the Jews, okay? The dynasty of the Estes. And they're always fighting the Pope, right? And they want to have their own, independence. In the long, long, long run, at the end of the 1500s, the Pope wins and takes over the Medina. But until then, because their family line ran out, but until then, they made a good show of it. And this is Hercules de Este. Let's go to the next one. Here, Hercules, Ercole. When the Pope says burn the Gemaras, they do that. Okay? So when I say the Jews have it okay, relatively speaking, I mean, this guy was not exactly a 20th century democratic liberal, okay? But for the Jews, no, I mean it. But for Jewish terms, it's as good as it gets. You understand? And that's how it goes. Now, the Italian Jewish culture that emerges in these centuries, in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, very unique. First of all, everywhere is small, tiny communities. It's 100, 500 people is already a whole lot. 1,500 people is huge. You understand? And we have more than that here in Shomrei Munah. They have a frum haskalah. Isn't that an interesting term? Okay? Meaning that they are Shomer Shabbos and all that without question. On the other hand, you'll find a wide spectrum of frumkeit in these small communities in Italy. You have right, left, center. On the right are Aguda types. Only Gemara, Halacha, that's it. If there is any other interest, Kabbalah. You understand? And you even have people who are so frum that they'll say Kabbalah is like a newfangled thing, and you shouldn't waste your time with that. Stick to shots and poskim. That's on the right. Then you have, on the left, you have people that say like this. Of course, you're Shomer Shabbos. Of course, the Torah mitzvahs. But science, math, Latin, Greek, the Christian writings of the church fathers in the New Testament, anything written by the classics, modern Italian stuff that's coming down the line all the time, Torah Mana, as we would say, or better yet, Torah and culture. And they were even right. Hebrew books about this. I was just looking the other day. Judah Messer, Leon's son, writes a book, Shevach HaNashim, in praise of women, against the guy who wrote a whole book that was following which classic author writes was it Euripides or somebody has the whole thing against the women, And usually you don't find rabbis writing these kinds of books. In Italy, Mefregnish Kinkashas, you find all kinds of things. And then you have the masses in the middle, which are, as always in the middle, a little more this way sometimes, a little more that way. And that's how life was lived. Now, what's interesting is that the primacy is on the Gemara, but nevertheless, you have chashur rabbis in Italy in the 14, 15, 1600s, 1700s with college education, which is unusual in the Jewish world. There were a number of universities, most famously the University of Padua, but there was also the University in Bologna, which will play a part in our story tonight, in Bologna and in Pisa, a few places like that, in which they did have Jewish graduates, as you say over here. Wasn't so easy, but it could be done, it was done. And so you'll be surprised to find a sefer written by somebody who looks very frum and all the rest of it, and the guy had an MD. or some equivalent degree. Somebody's got had law degrees, believe it or not, out of Bologna, and you'd be surprised. But when you look in their writings, you'll see there will be a reference here and there to some Latin author or some Greek thing or something along those lines. I mean, just off the top of my head, the Seforno comes to mind. Somebody like that, right? Who you consider to be a very from guy. He was a very from guy. He was a very from person. But you'll find, all these little references here and there, and you'd be surprised. You wouldn't find it among his Polish contemporaries, and there are more people like that, but you will find it in Italy. Italy is affected by Western culture and their attitude towards chinuch. This is the only place in the early modern period which you actually have schools. It's very fascinating. I hope to do later with you to see Simcha Asaf. Famous historian has his Mikorot L'Tolda Chinuch B'Yisrael. All these wonderful source documents. They collected thousands of them about the way chinuch was or wasn't conducted in the good old days. In Italy, at the age of 3, it's very great. At the age of 3, you start the Aleph Beis, and then only at 4 do you do, this, and then you do you learn Ivrit, then you do Chumash, and a little bit like the Mishnah says, you finish the whole Chumash straightforward, and afterwards you learn with Rashi, then you do Tanakh, and only after that, then you do Mishnah. You understand? You go through, and only after that you do the Talmud with emphasis on getting the grammar right and all this kind of business. And we have wonderful documents from Ferrara and other communities over there in which they have Avada Chinuch, believe it or not, which is shocking by the standards of Ashkenaz Europe. And, with a curriculum out there, even more shocking, there's schools for girls, you understand, which is just unheard of, And not in Italy, you get it? And there won't be, listen, it's not America, they're going to learn Gemara, but they have all kinds of, which guys, Chumash and Diktuk and Ivrit. And you will find this type of classically educated Jewish female, they will find in Italy, you won't find in other places. So what I'm trying to share with you is a world of small Jewish communities, very important communities. By the way, there was let's go back to the map just for a second, to go. There was a very important, I just want you to know, there was a very important yeshiva here in Padua that lasted 400 years. That's a long time where I come from. Okay, that's a long. That was like Volozhin, you understand? People learned to run by the Katzenollenbogen family and people like that. It was a Yiddish-speaking yeshiva until, like near Israel, they started talking English. In that case, Italian. And I just want you to consider. Here we are living in Baltimore, where near Israel was like 80 years or something like that. And here you're talking about a place where they had a yeshiva, and it's in a ghetto, meaning in a neighborhood. Didn't have a ghetto yet. They had a neighborhood hundreds of years. So, that just gives you a little bit of idea of the richness and the unusual and unexpected sorts of things you find in the Italian communities of those days. And what I really want to get across is this wonderful paradox where cultural insularity cohabits with cultural awareness. Hear what I said? Cultural insularity cohabits with cultural awareness. The typical Jewish graduate of Bologna or Padua University compartmentalizes. It's more like near Israel than YU. You see? There's no attempt. In fact, they're opposed to synthesis. They don't want to hear about that. This is what we do at work, and this is what we do in the ghetto. You see? This is what I know as a scientist. This is what I know as a front Jew. And there's 2 separate compartments, and Isaiah DeRoss is going to break through that a little bit. One has nothing to do in their mind with the other. The 16th century in general, the 1500s, is tough on the Jews, due mainly to the mid-century popes, the zeal of the Jesuits, and the spirit of the Counter-Reformation. So here we have our cast of villains. Here's the 2 bad popes that turn all everything around. They burn the Gemaras. They set up he's the guy that sets up cum nimbus absurdus with the famous papal bull that the Jews should be put into ghettos and taken away from all jobs except selling old clothes and, reduced to terrible penury, meaning he has a very machmir dika way of reading Catholic doctrine. Catholic doctrine is you can't kill them, right? But you can pressure them. So we're going to put on as much pressure as we can, make life miserable for them so to get them to convert. Both of these popes were real bad. Loyola, of course, founded the Jesuits. The Jesuits are super frum, very zealous. They had a lot of zeal. And part of their zeal is to convert the Jews, especially in Italy, for crying out loud. The headquarters of the Catholic religion. And so they'll make life pretty doggone miserable for the Jews during this century, especially in the middle century. So we're talking about expulsions, burnings of the Talmud, and forced sermons. Okay? Here's a sign. Okay, in one of the churches, I think I forget where it'll tell you right over here. And he says, "Is this a sign that's there today?" And what does it say? Monumental Gateway, goes back to Augustus. Read the last sentence. For centuries, this church was packed every Saturday with Jews. Saturday, I tell you, forced by decree to listen to Christian sermons. So Shacharis is at 6, Shul's over at 9, and they're like 11th. No, this is true though. I mean, it sounds funny, but it wasn't funny. You understand? At 11:30 or 1:30 or something like this, you have to go. The way they did it was like this: X number of people in the community. You get it? So in other words, every week, depending on the size of the community, let's do argument's sake, 50 Jews, 70 Jews, you have to go and you have to listen to the sermons. There's a whole literature with this. Some of the real frummies who were forced to go put wax in the ear, and therefore the church sends a priest around to take the wax out. And it's a whole long kind of business. And I'll tell you right now, to survive this, I mean, it's not a dumb idea. Plenty of Jews will convert under this system. You know, you'll sit here and you'll say, well, who's going to fall for that balloon? It's not true. When you hear this pounded into you week after week, you know, it does after a while get to you. You understand? I mean, the Catholic Church was not stupid. And so it was really tough being Jewish, as you can see over here. In general, I would point out, and this is important for our story tonight, that in the 16th century, especially in Italy, there was an intellectual attack on Judaism. A lot of this has to do with the Counter-Reformation, since the Catholic Church was challenged by the Protestants early in the 1500s. Martin Luther started in 1519, 1520. And you know, Martin Luther got away with it. And so for the first time, the Catholic Church monopoly on Christianity was successfully challenged. By that, I mean they weren't able to burn them. So, and then other guys popped up. So the church realized after a while, they didn't want to, but they realized after a while, there are some problems with us. And we have to mechazik ourselves and get rid of some of the worst abuses. I'll give you an example. Remember, Martin Luther said the Pope is selling indulgences. So in other words, you can do an Avera, and then if you pay money, you know, that gets you off your hell, you know. So that was very offensive. And they got rid of that sort of thing, and they tightened up the business. You don't have any more Borgia popes after the Counter-Reformation. They're from, you see. And well, that's interesting, but they're from. And part of that, therefore, is a chizuk of Catholicism, which is an impressive intellectual tradition, whatever you want to say, and therefore it expresses itself in many ways, and part of the ways is to come up with new arguments and a zeal against the Protestants and against the Muslims, but locally against the Jews. And so if you're Jewish, there's a whole bunch of books and things like that, media, that come out now, somewhat similar to what you do today. I feel sorry for the regular Jew, not like yourself and myself, who's already fortified very much with our own culture, and we don't have to worry, I hope, about reading all the, but imagine a kid in public school, just, you know, in Baltimore or anywhere else, who's just Jewish, and he doesn't know much of anything, and he goes on the news, and he flips, and he surfs the internet, and oh my God, you know, everything's terrible about Judaism after a while. It kind of gets to you. You understand? And he doesn't benefit from the cultural insularity, more intense or less intense, that you and I enjoy. I repeat, enjoy. And he doesn't have any benefit of this boy or girl, and it really gets to them. So that's what happens in the Middle Ages, in the 15th century. I mean, I'll say it in the 16th century. And so what really happens in Italy is a revival of the 13th century's intellectual assaults on Judaism. I don't know if you remember, we talked about this early, but this is the time of the Ramban. Okay? And Raymond de Penaforte was the famous head of the Catholic Church, the tip of the spear in the 1200s in Aragon. And here's a classic religious, there's a picture of a classic religious disputation. Here are the rabbis with those hats, and here are the galachim. And everybody knows that the Ramban, for example, was forced by Raymond de Penaforte to participate in the great disputation against Pablo Cristiani. Okay? And the Ramban was the Ramban, but there are other people who didn't have such a great time, not that he did. And it was really tough. And Raymond de Penaforte was a dedicated Catholic who set up 2 Catholic yeshivas, one to teach the priests the Shas, the Talmud thoroughly, and the other one to learn the Quran thoroughly. And then from one should come out the missionaries for the Jews, the other one should come out the missionaries for the Muslims. They really had the zeal that they're going to do this sort of things. And let me tell you something. You can say whatever you want. They did go through all the Jewish writings. Gemara, Rashi, Tosas, Rishonim, Achronim, all that. It's pretty remarkable, I can tell you. If you can go online now, and they have in Germany, they have you can see it online, you know, photos of the old books I'm talking about, like the Pugia Fidei of Raymond Martini that I'll talk about. You see over there, he quotes not only Gemara, but Rabbeinu Bachaya, and Rabbeinu Tam and Tosas, and a Beis Yosef. I mean, you're just amazed. You understand? Because you think, well, they're all superficial and all the rest of it. And they're not. They were fired by zeal, and therefore they were looking for, as he calls it, the diamond in the dung heap. Any argument they can find make Judaism look bad. And they went pretty thoroughly through it. And in the 1500s in Italy, you have famous Peter Galatinus, who's an Italian who reworks the works of the Puglia Fidei. So here's the original one. This is from Spain originally by Raymond Martini, who was a Talmud of Raymond de Penaforte. I hope I'm not losing you. No, he's one of these real zealous priests in the 1200s, in the time of the Ramban. And Puglia Fidei means the dagger of faith. So here's a Jew, and here's the dagger that's going to kill the Jew. He's wearing a tefillin over there, as you can see, because I'm going to show you from the Talmud, from the Bavli, the Yerushalmi, Mechilta, Sifra, and all those kind of books, and the Rambam and all the rest of it. I have the dagger. You understand? I'm going to drive a stake through the heart of the Jewish devil. You see? And here in the 1500s, now unfortunately you have what you call the printing press. And so Peter Galatinus, Galatino, is able to publish this repeatedly a number of times. And that means the average Italian-speaking reader can get all the junk against Judaism and in there, and now you got to have patience to read it. So only somebody's very zealous. So the Jews rely on the fact that the average priest, unless he's zealous, give him a little bit of vino and you can call it a day. But if the guy is strong, then it's a problem. And the problem, my friends, is most Jews don't know Judaism. Correct? The average, nobody here, the average person doesn't know, if they ask him a question from the Talmud or this and that and the other, how to answer those sorts of things. Now, one of the main targets for the attack by these kinds of writers, of course, would be the silly Jewish anthropomorphisms as they see it, especially in the Agartha. Now, the Bible is full of anthropomorphisms where God is presented in one kind of human form or another, but the Gemara is, the Talmud takes it to another level. Okay? The Agartha and the Talmud, oh my goodness, God cries. He says, somebody gets hurt, my arm hurts. And he wakes up in the middle of the night screaming, and oh, woe am I that my children are exiled from the table, I can't do anything about me. To an outsider is beyond blasphemous, you understand? And it's weird. That is an old trope from the Middle Ages, to which a number of standard Jewish replies had evolved in the course of the Middle Ages. What are the standard Jewish replies? Well, the classic one is like this: to hell with the goyim. They don't understand anything. They're stupid and wicked. They have no shaykhs to kedusha. Blah blah blah. In other words, just ignore it. Another one. This is a not ineffective tactic for the masses. Correct? Just the heck with them. All right. But it's not good for the intellectuals. It's not good for the Jewish intellectuals. So the Rambam, most famously, who lived in the 12th century, the Rambam. As we all know, says Agartha is allegorical. You follow? There's a famous passage here. I took the trouble to have printed out. This is a translation, good translation, from the Rambam's intro to Per Chelik, as it's called, in which he discusses the nature of the Agartha, of the stories you find in the Talmud, some of them which seem weird. And he classically says, I won't read it for you. You can read it as we have it on the screen. He says, very famously, that there's three types of people out there, A, B, and C. Some people think they're frum, and therefore they take everything literally. So it said Rabbi Akiva jumped over the moon with a spoon, it happened. And even though it makes no sense, he says, even though I'll admit it makes no sense, but to them, being frum means just take everything literally, and that's it. If the Torah says it, that's the end. If it's in the Gemara or in the Ein Yaakov, that's the end of the discussion. And then he says you have the second group, which say like this, this is nuts, and the rabbis are crazy. I'm talking about Jews.